the big challenge really for voters in March, if we get the election in March, is that we are going to have to vote for people whom we believe can actually get into government and will deliver what they promise and not have to get involved in auction politics in the formation of a government. So, Jim, are there politicians we can vote for who are genuine, well-motivated, patriotic people?
Yeah, believe it or not, Justine, there are. And there is a significant number of them. But unfortunately, what I found was that they tended to go native the longer they were in, that to deliver for their own constituents. And I know Jane will disagree with me slightly in this, and I'll bow to her greater insight, her academic insight into it. For me, the multi-seat constituency goes to the root of our difficulties. And that phrase that I quoted earlier, if I don't do it, somebody else will. I'll give you the reverse of that. And Jane touched on it, and in relation to the sports facilities. The old lottery, as it was until it was discontinued a couple of years ago, the lottery awards were basically a slush fund for government TDs. I think that's generally accepted. I specifically recall, I can remember again exactly where I was when I got the phone call, because I was campaigning in the 2002 election, and there was a club in my hometown which was in dire need of a lot of money, and it was easily the biggest club in the area, and I was trying to get some serious money for it. And I know that one of my constituency colleagues actively lobbied against that allocation with his friend, the Minister for Sport of the time, because he didn't want me getting the credit for bringing significant funds into a very large club just before the election. And my colleague succeeded. And that club to this day are still struggling. And they have lost 10 years of serious development for a whole, I'd say probably, certainly hundreds, possibly even thousands of children in the area over a 10-year period, because they just didn't have the facilities. And it was just a question. It wasn't that the cheque was going somewhere else. It was just that it wasn't coming to my area because a colleague worked actively against it. And I would agree totally with Jane in relation that we have to get away from this, the cultivation of particular areas where there is a particularly senior or influential politician, and we have to get back to the level playing field for everybody and for everywhere. How do you identify the decent people? I honestly don't know, Justine. That's being straight with you. I would, again, the laws of libel prevent me. There would be some who, when I think of one extreme, come immediately to mind, and there are others who are of the other extreme, and there are a lot of people in the middle. One good thing of the current financial crisis is that there's no money to be sloshing around, because so much of the last 10 years, and particularly in and around social partnership, was bought. Like we had I've referred to the Sports Capital Grant Scheme to give it its full title. We had the SIP2 account at another extreme for high-profile members of social partnership. We had the directorships of a lot of state boards and semi-state companies. I'm not saying all of them were wrong, but certainly there was a system of patronage involved in all of that at a time of plenty. I think, as I say, one of the good things about that now is that the time of plenty is no more, and partnership is going to have to deal with some hard questions where saying no is going to have to be an option rather than the perpetual yes that we had. Like sorry for hogging it, but the Bert couldn't say no. Just as simple as that. He'd put the hand on your shoulder. I'll be all right, I'll leave that with me. And then he'd get somebody else to do the dirty on it. But he'd never say no. We have to learn to say no. In the same way as we're talking reform and we're talking honesty and we're talking about our own responsibilities, that starts first thing in the morning when you look in the mirror. And it starts with each one of us. And it finishes last thing at night when you look in the mirror and ask the question. And if we don't have it right for ourselves, individually, difficult as that is for all of us, when others are getting away with it, we won't get it right on the wider base either. I very clearly recall one of the aspects of the Good Friday Agreement which slipped largely under the radar was a payment from the south to the north of, I think, 650 or maybe 700 million, which, you know, that helped to seal the deal. Now, it was, I think it was ascribed to a road network in the north linking with different entry roads from the Republic, and that was how it was passed off. But there was a culture of the time, look, we've plenty of money, let's throw a few quid in here, throw a few quid in there, and suddenly everybody's talking to each other with a smile on their face. And that was the essence of the time. I thought you were going to mention the National Children's Hospital as another ring fence job. You know, like, when you think about that, it's open to all kinds of questions.
Yeah, that's a big scandal, and I think it's something we might very well have a tribunal of inquiry into at some stage, or we should have.
I think there's some value in feeling a sense of collective shame, and I mean that in a way in which propels us or mobilises us or motivates us to act collectively. I'm not saying that each one of us is responsible, or that the people more generally are responsible for the situation we found ourselves in. But I think there's some benefit in as a nation feeling a sense of shame for what has happened, for what we have thrown away as a nation. Now, that doesn't negate or excuse what has gone on, or it doesn't in any way excuse the responsibility that, or the role, I should say, that our politicians have played in landing us in a situation we find ourselves in. It doesn't get away from the need to hold those who are criminally responsible in many cases for the way in which our banking sector has conducted itself, shouldn't be held accountable for. Justine asked me what steps do I believe we need to take, and I think one of them is to hold those people to account. The problem is that this, as it stands, that we don't have a system, even a legal system, that lends itself to the prosecution of those people. As Justine was saying not too long ago, we spoke about it in 2007, Bertie Ahern had said that Paul Appleby could wait his turn. The Standards and Public Office Commission does not have the resources or the power to investigate members of Parliament or effectively investigate office holders. And we have not, as a nation, put these issues on the public agenda. Very few people have voted according to the conscience. Very few people looked at a list of candidates and said, yeah, I'll vote for him or her because they stand for openness or they stand for accountability. They voted for them because they wanted to raise taxes or lower taxes, or because they felt it was good for their constituency. And it's not to point the blame on any individual or collectively. I think the book out at the moment called Honour Code by a gentleman called Anthony Appiah. He's a philosopher and historian, and he talks about the role of honour and a role of shame in creating social change. And the role of shame, for example, in the abolition of slavery back in the early 19th century. So I think there's a degree of shame that I think is to be shared collectively, that I think can be useful. But it's not to apportion blame at the foot of everyone in society. I think there are those in society that deserve to be held account and need to be held to account.
I was just going to say, I think I worked for the only newspaper that was actually against the Lisbon Treaty, but I'm not taking any credit for that because I disagreed with it. But I do think that the media has actually got away with murder for the last 2 years. It has used the property supplements as the scapegoat and loaded all the blame on those, whereas there was a pervasive attitude in the media that cultivated this sort of shallow celebrity culture that cheer-led the sort of celebration of ostentatious consumerism and vulgarity and did not question what was going on. And I do wish that became a much bigger issue, because just as you get the politicians you vote for, you get the newspapers you vote for. And believe me, as a journalist, or you get the newspapers you buy. As a journalist, it would make my life much easier if people actually, started demanding higher standards of the media as well.